Let's talk some chess. It's probably the dream of many of us to play Magnus Carlsen in a game of chess, but very few of us achieve it. This person did by baiting Magnus. The story behind this game is pretty interesting. Magnus often makes videos with Chess24. I'll link the video below, where he'll play a game and sort of annotate and commentate the game as it goes along. And in this case, he picked out someone with the username Magnus is poor player. Magnus rose to the challenge and saw that his name was being dragged through the mud and said, I'm going to play this player and I'm going to beat him. So if you want to get Magnus's attention, I definitely don't recommend doing this, of course, but kind of a funny game. Magnus playing against Magnus is poor player. And Magnus is poor player opens up with e4. I'll note that Magnus is poor player, that user has a rating of 1500, but doesn't really play like a 1500 player. So probably a strong player who just logged on and created a new account. At least that's what I hypothesize, and what Magnus in the video also hypothesizes. So the real Magnus here plays e5, and now we have d4, and Magnus plays the Nimzovich defense, putting the knight on c6. The problem with this move, the reason I don't like this move, is because it allows d5, forcing the knight to move away, and this actually leads to a slight advantage for white, as per the engine. The knight's forced to move to e7, and now you have these very nice central pawns with the white pieces, and you can develop very comfortably. So a slight advantage here for Magnus is poor player. But the real Magnus sort of says how he wants to play very comfortably, get a comfortable position, not take too many aggressive sort of ideas. So he doesn't mind going down a little bit positionally in the first couple of moves. Knight to f3 is played by Magnus's poor player. This comes with an attack on the e5 pawn, which is undefended. So the real Magnus defends it with knight to g6, and now the pawn is defended. Bishop to d3, bit of an awkward move because this bishop, a bit of an awkward square for the bishop because it's sort of blocked in by this e4 pawn, which is going nowhere for the moment. And now bishop to c5 for Magnus. A much less awkward square for this dark square bishop. Magnus mentions how this will be a very powerful bishop going forward. Magnus sort of anticipates getting a lot of play on the king side, and this bishop obviously is zooming in on this f2 pawn, and if white castles king side, which, spoiler alert, white does on the next move, now this bishop is pinning the f2 pawn to the king, and just going to be a very valuable piece in the attack going forward. So here we have d6 by the real Magnus, preparing to develop his light squared bishop, and even cementing this bishop on c5, and now knight b to d2, developing a piece for Magnus is poor player, followed by knight to h6 by Magnus. Magnus comments in the video that he doesn't put the knight on f6 because he wants to get this f5 move in with the pawn, and of course you can't move a pawn if there's a knight sitting in front of it, so knight to h6 is the idea. We have knight to b3 here by Magnus's poor player, attacking the bishop on c5. Magnus, of course, just retreats it. He doesn't want to trade. And now bishop to g5 by Magnus's poor player, attacking the queen. The bishop is protected by the knight, so the queen cannot capture back. Magnus noted here he's not really worried about bishop takes because pawn takes back, opening up the g-file. And spoiler alert, we're going to see sort of this idea as the game continues. So in any case, the bishop is attacking the queen. Magnus, of course, sees the threat and plays f6 to ward the bishop off. And here we do have bishop captures on h6, pawn captures on h6, and now the g-file is semi-open for Magnus, and you can sort of just see the attack starting to materialize. The rook can come to g8, the knight can come to h4, or even f4, and the bishop can join in, and things are going to get difficult for this king, even though the king is behind three very nice pawns, and the knight and the rook are doing a good job defending for the moment. So here we have a4 by Magnus's poor player, hoping to get this a5 move in, which would force the bishop to run to one of these two squares. Both are attacked by the knight, and essentially that would force the bishop to be traded off for the knight. Magnus, of course, sees the threat and plays a6, and after a5, bishop just retreats to a7 since the square has been vacated by the pawn. Now we have queen to e2 with the white pieces, and unfortunately, while this was a okay position for both sides, it's okay if you play perfectly here with the white pieces, you should be fine. But as so often happens with Magnus, he sort of just plays very solidly until you make a tiny mistake, and then he just presses his advantage and never looks back. And queen e2 is a mistake because it allows knight to f4 with the tempo. And Magnus in the video says, I'm so thankful, I appreciate the tempo that he gave me. And the idea here is that this move comes with an attack on the queen, so white has to do something to deal with this attack. And in this case, white just moves the queen back to d2, and this is the whole idea behind a tempo. Magnus was able to move the knight to f4 essentially in 0 time because his opponent couldn't do anything, and Magnus essentially paused time and moved his pieces to a better position, and that's sort of the idea behind gaining this tempo. Another thing in chess, it's never good if you make a move and then are forced to reverse the move on the very next move. So, return the piece to the starting square. That's never very good. And now this is a great knight. It's eyeing this g2 pawn, and things are going to get difficult for this white king. So queen to d7 by Magnus. He mentions how he sees a lot of good moves here. Rook to g8 is obviously, I think, the simplest one, but he likes the idea of queen to d7. He says it looks pleasant. He keeps saying that this is a really pleasant position to play with the black pieces, so it's good that he's having fun. And now queen to e1, knight to e1 with the white pieces, adding a defender to the g2 square, and also opening up sort of this alleyway for the white queen to defend, prevent the black queen from coming to g4, at least for the moment. Rook to g8 by Magnus, getting the rook lined up with the enemy king. And now king to h1. And the idea behind this move is it's unpinning the pawn on f2. Why is this pawn pinned, you may ask? Don't forget about this bishop on a7, which a turn ago was pinning this pawn to the king. So the king moves to h1. This pawn is no longer pinned, and the king is no longer on the same line as the rook. So a reasonably principled move here for Magnus's poor player. Queen to g7 now by the real Magnus, obviously now just threatening a ton on this g2 pawn, along with the knight. That's three pieces eyeing the pawn. It's only defended by the knight and the king. So here, white probably does this arithmetic and just plays this g3 move. It looks like a very reasonable move. It is now protected by two pawns and attacking the knight, and this looks okay. But the problem with this move is it allows bishop to h3. So the bishop all the way on c8, jumping into the game, now with an attack on this rook on f1. The proper defensive move here is actually to play bishop to e2, getting this bishop along this defensive diagonal. And now it's sort of an interesting... Oops, sorry. What do I want to do here? It's sort of an interesting line. To continue the attack, Magnus would play knight to h3. And here you actually can't... Did I do this line correctly? No. I don't want to do that. What line did I want to do? No. I'm sorry. Technical difficulties. This is so weird. Okay, yeah, that's... Sorry, guys. Okay, you want to put the knight on g3, and then the idea is you can't capture here with the pawn, because then you get not queen to g2. Sorry about that. You don't get queen to g2. This looks like checkmate because the queen is protected by the rook, but the knight just captures back, so that doesn't work. But you do get bishop to h3, so you've sacrificed a knight and opened up the g file completely, and now this is just crazy. Here you can sort of delay a bit by moving the bishop to h5 with check, and then the queen protecting, but you can just sort of see how this is not going to go well with the bishop and the rook and the queen. So that's actually the best defense. It's still, well, I'm sorry, I'm being super confusing. In this position, you wouldn't capture the knight, but you can see how, and you can sort of see why this is a better defense. Instead, g3 was played instead of bringing the bishop to e2. What I was trying to say is that once the knight moves to h3, you don't want to take it in this potential line, but I'm just probably mixing everyone up, so just ignore that. And the point is that g3 is on the board, attacking this knight, and the pawns are protected twice. So here, bishop to h3, as mentioned, and now Magnus is threatening to go up the exchange, give up the bishop for the rook, and the rook is obviously stronger, so that'd be good for Magnus. And here, just rook to g1 by Magnus's poor player. Now with some interesting threats, if the pawn is able to take, well, actually, I guess not really an interesting threat. So let's say Magnus just ignores this and just plays, I don't know, c6. You can't take the knight with the pawn because then queen takes on g1 is checkmate because the rook is protecting the queen. So it sort of looks like you're threatening a discovered attack if you capture with the pawn of the rook on the queen, but it's not really a discovered attack because the queen can capture back with checkmate. So Magnus, of course, sees this, and here he just plays an even better move. He plays bishop captures on f2, and I told you to not forget about this bishop on this diagonal. We talked about, for a while. That is a very powerful bishop, and now that the rook has finally moved away from g1 because it was forced away by the light squared bishop, now you finally get the dark squared bishop capturing on f2 and attacking the rook, and now this rook is just totally in a pickle. There's nowhere for this rook to go where it won't be captured by a bishop. So Magnus's poor player actually just ignores it and sort of gives up the rook here, since the bishops will attack it. And here Magnus plays a funny move. He just castles queenside because he's like, there's no threat happening. I might as well just castle and be comfortable and have a nice game. So it doesn't continue the attack at all. And now we have queen to d2 with the white pieces connecting the two rooks, getting the queen more into the defense, but this is obviously a very difficult position to defend against. So Magnus finally captures on g1. Now that the queen, so before it was okay to castle here because the rook cannot escape anywhere. Again, the bishops would take it. The bishop's guarding e1, so that doesn't work. As soon as the queen lifts to d2, the rook can escape, so Magnus now just captures it with the bishop on g1. We have rook captures back, so rook has replaced rook, but now Magnus is up the exchange and he still has an attack, and that's going to be enough for Magnus to win. So here he plays queen to g4, threatening this knight, which, even though it's very deep here in white's position, the knight is undefended, and if captured would come with check, so you have to worry about that. And again, you still can't capture this knight with the pawn because of, actually, can you? Wait, no. What? Yeah, you can't because of then queen. I'm sorry, getting myself all mixed up. The nice thing about this queen to g4 move is if you take the knight with the pawn, then you just get queen takes knight on f3, so a knight for a knight. Instead here, white moves the queen to f2, adding some protection to this knight, but now knight takes on d3, finally getting away from this pawn attack and taking a bishop. So a knight for a bishop, knight takes on d3, pawn takes on d3, and now f5 for Magnus. Just playing chill, as he says. Like, I should mention that, he said very long ago in the opening that he was waiting to play f5 and get some attack on the king side, and now he finally gets this move in, and it obviously is a disruptive move because the pawn is advancing down the board, and you don't want to let Magnus get f4 in. And for the moment, white just plays knight b to d2. We have f takes on e4, knight takes on e4, and now rook to f8. And Magnus can sort of, is setting up a pin here. The rook is now pinning the knight to the queen, and now he's just going to try to attack this knight a ton. It's already attacked twice by the queen and the rook. It's only defended once by the white queen, so here white defends it again and plays knight e to d2. Now there are two defenders of the knight, but now Magnus plays a very funny move, which is actually recommended by the engine. He plays king to b8, again, just sort of having fun, not being too aggressive, preventing any ideas of queen to a7, where the queen can potentially sort of get in Magnus's back line. So now there's no queen to a7 move that works. So here you're basically without a move with the white pieces. You can't. All these pieces are defending the knight. The rook is sort of defending everything. It's helping out with the king, defending the g file. So you have no moves. You don't want to move this pawn, or you'll just create a pass pawn. Or I guess this is you'll create a pass pawn for Magnus. You can't move these pawns. So the only pawn you can move is the b pawn, and here white plays b3, but this allows Magnus to very leisurely set up a rook battery. He has a beautiful rook lift here to rook to f6, queen to e2, just sort of wasting time with these moves. Not much you can do to improve the position. And now rook to f8. And now there are three pieces attacking this knight. The knight is only defended once by its fellow knight and the queen, and there's no real way to defend it again. The rook can't defend it from f1 because the bishop will capture the rook. The king can't move to g2 because the bishop's covering g2, so this knight is going to fall. And here, white makes the real losing move and just plays knight to e1, getting out of harm's way. But the problem here is that you've opened up discovered attack from the queen to the queen, and the queen is undefended. And Magnus, of course, sees this and just captures the queen. There is kind of an interesting line here. The best move, instead of obviously just giving up your queen, is queen to e4, offering a queen trade. And here, Magnus would retreat. If Magnus played exactly like the engine, which he often does, you can retreat the queen to g8. You don't quite want to give up this really good attacking queen. d4, bishop to f5, attacking the queen. queen retreats, and now even e4 attacking this knight. Knight retreats, and now e3 attacking this knight, and now you're sort of forced to take with the queen. But now the queen is no longer, well, now you get queen takes on d5. This obviously comes with check. Here, if you block with the queen, then Magnus can just put the bishop on e6. And after queen takes, bishop takes. This obviously comes with check. And here the king can't move anywhere. You can either block with the rook or block with the knights. Blocking with the knight seems like a better idea. So knight e2, f3, but now rook takes, knight takes, bishop takes, and now you have to block with the rook on g2. And after the bishop takes it, Magnus is just up a rook in the endgame, and this is totally winning. So that's the sort of the main line with best defense. But here, white just played knight to e1. This leads to mate in just a couple of moves. So queen takes on e2, knight d to f3, and now, let's see if you can find it's made in a couple moves. See if you can find the right pattern, the right sort of series of moves that gets a win for Magnus over his enemy. Magnus is a poor player. Well, I'll give you a couple of seconds. Okay, so Magnus is up a queen. He has 2 rooks on the open f-file. A lot of moves work here, but the fastest one is rook takes on f3, just clearing out this f-file. After the knight takes, then queen to f3 with check, and now the game is all but over. The king has nowhere to go. You have to block with the rook, but now you just get the finishing touch, queen to g2 with checkmate. So yeah, that's that. Ooh, here's my chair handle. So yeah, cool that this guy got Magnus to play him. Magnus joked that he was furious in the video, but I'll link the video below. It's pretty funny, and it's always good to see Magnus sort of talking about his moves as he goes. Not maybe the most groundbreaking game, but a very nice example of a kingside attack on a castled king, which sort of comes up a lot, obviously, in your games, and this is a way that you can see the best, the best in the world do it. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Drop a like, drop subscribe. Let me know of other games you'd like me to review, and we'll see you next time.